Welcome to the Charlevoix Stories Project, a continuation of the Charlevoix Oral History Project. Today is September 15th in 2016, and we are located at the Charlevoix Public Library in Charlevoix, Michigan. I'm Mary Snyder, and I'm interviewing Bill Supernaw, who will be talking today on the Palace Theater. He was the owner and operator for quite a number of years, and it was located in downtown Charlevoix on
220 Bridge.
And then it moved to Antrim Street.
In 1995.
So can you tell us how you happened to take over the theater? Let's start there and then we'll go back and talk a little bit about the history.
Well, I've been here all my life so far. Sam, my cousin, Sam Supernaw, came back from California. He was an accountant and he moved back to town in 1970. Or 71. I was working at the radio station in Petoskey at that time. He set up his own he started working for another accountant in Petoskey, and after about a year, he opened his own little office in Charlevoix. And over the course of about a year, in those days, as you remember, the Palace Theater was open. We used to go there when we were kids in the 50s. And probably even in the late 40s. And back when movies were 14 cents, popcorn and
a Green River was
and a Green
the rest
River,
of it.
pop and popcorn was a nickel each, and
yeah.
14 cents plus 10 cents for pop and popcorn, you left you a penny, and we'd go across to Joe Williams' cigar store and get 2 pieces of candy for a penny.
We would.
And went home broke, but that was just fine.
And we ran home fast to beat that 9:30 curfew.
Exactly.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. But we got talking one day, and at some point, Les and Louise Taylor owned the theater they owned the theater in Charlevoix. They also owned the Temple and Hollywood theaters in Petoskey. And when television started to come in, cut into the movie-going experience, plus Charlevoix then, like now, slowed down a lot in the off-season, especially in the dead of winter. So they used to close it up. It started right after Christmas, and then they even started closing the theater in October and November after the summer season. And Sam and I just kicked it around, and I knew Les and Louise because I sold them advertising for all 3 theaters for the radio station. And we got talking about whether or not they'd be interested in selling it. And Sam and I didn't have any money, but we did have jobs, and we thought it'd be a nice hobby, plus an opportunity, and he was interested. Tom Murda was the Chamber of Commerce executive director at that time, and we needed a 3rd person to swing the deal. And when we were talking with the Taylors and the real estate, we needed one more person to make it work. And Tom just happened to be walking by on Bridge Street at Lighthouses, and we knew him well too, and out the door we went, "Tom, come on in," and he had no idea what he was getting into. But he also had a job, so the 3 of us ended up making a deal. And that was probably in late November or early December, and we put that deal together real quick with the help of a realtor named Dan Vreeland, and with the help of one of the banks in town. And we opened it up just before Christmas in December of 1972. And ran it ever since.
Now, did you run it then just on the weekends, or?
I think we were open for 2 solid weeks around the holidays when we opened. And there was, we might have stayed open 7 days for a few weeks. Just because the novelty and the fact that it was open again in the winter attracted a lot of attention. I know the first week we were open, we showed a brand new movie. Big movies like they do today come out around the holidays and in the summer. And the first movie we showed that started on the 22nd was a movie with Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise. And then that ran for 1 week. And after that, our second movie that came in just before New Year's started was Cabaret with Liza Minnelli. And that was a huge hit. And after several months at the Academy Awards or something in March or whenever that was, oddly as it seems, the Cabaret won the Academy Award for the Best Picture of 1972, and the Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise movie was named the worst movie of the year. So our opening 2 weeks, we had the worst and the best, but we had good attendance at both of them just because we were open. And we got a lot of good positive publicity. In fact, I think that one of the reasons that they agreed to finance it, I remember the bank telling us that you guys don't have any money. And we didn't. We were only in our 20s. And I said, and we all borrowed money for the down payment, and we all paid it back. But the bank it was kind of a civic project with the bank too. And I remember the bank had a lot of positive publicity in the local paper. They wrote a nice editorial about how it was that, modestly, 3 young enterprising guys bought the theater, and an enterprising bank in Charlevoix agreed to finance it. And there was some, on my part, I borrowed the money from John Harrington, who owned the radio station. $5,000 we all had to come up with.
Oh my goodness.
That's my first car, I think. I know I bought my first car for $2,800, and it was a nice brand new Chevrolet. So $5,000 was a lot of money. But he loaned me the $5,000, and I had to sign a contract with him that I would stay with the radio station until that was paid back. So he had his leverage, I got my money, we got the theater, and everything worked out.
How long did it take you to pay it back?
I wasn't making a whole lot of money in those days. Probably, I think I paid back maybe $25, $30 a week until as my salary went up. Sorry to say, I was pretty good at what I did, and I started making some decent money. And it kind of became a priority. It wasn't charging me any interest. I can't remember exactly, but it got paid off on a timely basis, and everybody was happy. And apparently the other guys got theirs paid back too.
Well, then did you continue working for the radio station, or did you go full-time with the theater?
I worked with the radio station until about 1986, almost 25 years. I started there in the early 60s. Sam kept his business going, and it was only open on the weekdays at night, matinees on Saturday and Sunday, which was our free time. And it kind of remained a hobby, but it was a fun hobby. Always liked working with people and seeing people, but we had a lot of good help too. Evelyn Norrit, Teresa Norrit, some of those people. Evelyn worked at the theater before we bought it. She was one of the hard noses that kept us kids in line. She and Dorothy Armstrong and some other ones that you might remember going back to when we were in school. They'd toss you right out of there if you made too much noise or got out of control. I did end up with the whole theater by myself, but that was in the mid to late 80s after I left the radio station. I needed something to do full time. And Tom Murda, unfortunately, had died prematurely. Sam and I ended up with it, and I bought Sam out of the theater, and I ran it on Bridge Street until 1995. That's 94, I started negotiating for a new multi-screen theater on Antrim Street. And we moved over there. We opened, I think, on the 2nd of July, 1995 at the new location.
Well, can you describe a little bit what the theater on Bridge Street was like? What the interior was like? And
it was a standard big old 485-seat single-screen theater. It had a lot of, there was a lot of grandiosity. It was nice, and it was artistic. It had, on the ceiling, it had plywood painted with different, it looked like an Art Deco thing, like most big theaters did. And it had, it had character to it, I guess. And it had fancy light fixtures on the wall. We had drapes that opened and closed. Sam and I put those in, that opened then they'd close after the previews and then open up again, and now our main attraction and things like that. That changed a little when we moved because it became all about just the presentation on the screen. And the inside, but it used to be an event. And there's still a few of those big theaters in the city. Not many single screen theaters left anywhere, not just in northern Michigan or in Michigan itself. But now they're just, they're like a warehouse with dressed up a little bit, but the main thing is the screen and the projection booth. It's all digital, it's changed completely.
I think it's also unique that Charlevoix has a theater in the downtown business district. Aren't most of them now out away?
My initial plan was to go wherever I could get. Parking has always been an issue. I had a deal with the people at Kmart, south of Charlevoix. People around will know where that is. And I was going to go out there, and nothing was signed yet. And there was also interest from a gentleman that owned the Glens Market Shopping Center at the M66 131 interchange. There was space there, and he would have liked to have it. And the big attraction was there was lots of parking. A lot of times parking isn't a problem, but on a rainy day in the summer when the movie house gets packed, a non-beach day, we used to call it, Olson's would get parked, downtown would get filled up, and everybody would be in the movie, and it never caused any huge problems, but I know I probably could have had more business had I had more parking. People went, and I used to hear stories that, well, yeah, we drove around the block, couldn't find, so we went to Petoskey. But almost at the last minute, before I was going to sign a deal with one of the two proposals south of town, the Downtown Development Authority got involved. They had at some point purchased the old Casino Pontiac Cadillac dealership on Antrim Street, and they said that was available. Wasn't quite as big as I wanted, but we looked at it. The architect came up from Grand Rapids, designed something, and we ended up with, there was enough room for 3 screens and a nice sized lobby and good sized restrooms. And a good deal was presented, and the DDA's motivation was to keep the theater in downtown Charlevoix. And we did it.
Now, why did you go to 3 screens? What was your reason for that?
Just so we could show more movies than one at a time.
How do you get the movies? How do they come in?
They come through, come almost directly from the film companies in Hollywood. Dallas is a big headquarters now for movie operations, or at least it was then. I had a film booker that was scheduled out of Royal Oak, Clark Theater Service, and he booked movies for theaters around Michigan. In fact, he had a nice little business, Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. But he would line it up, and I had a lot of input. I subscribed to trade magazines. I knew what was coming out 6 months down the road, you know. The whole part of merchandising movies became as big as the movies themselves. Previews became spectacular. I mean, I'm sure no one came to movies just to see the previews, but that was a big deal. If we would have previews to a Star Wars movie or any of the big movies months in advance, and people would come and we'd show 3 or 4 previews of coming attractions. And people would get excited about it, and they knew when we had the posters, they started making the big, what we call one-sheets, the 3-foot by 5-foot movies that we'd have promoting what was coming next and what was coming at Christmas time and what was coming at Easter time and what was coming in the summer. So there was a lot of attention, not only for the current attraction, the main attraction that night, there was a lot of anticipation as to what was coming down the road. People would get excited about Star Wars, opens Memorial Day weekend and things like that.
Didn't you run a movie all one summer?
Yes, a couple of them. Grease with John Travolta was one of them. We had someone picketing our sign, our theater, saying, "Degrease us." And in those days, I'm not sure quite how the financing goes or the payment in percentage. It's all based on a percentage what you pay for rent. But in those days, the longer you ran a movie, the more you made. you'd start out maybe paying 50% of your gross to the film company. And then after 2 weeks, it would drop to 40%, and then 35%. The lowest it would ever go would be 30%. But when we ran Grease for 16 or 17 weeks, we were making, and people just kept coming and coming. There's so much. There were several movies. Titanic was another one. But that one was at the new theater where we had 3 screens, so there was a lot more flexibility. We put that in the small screen, but I think we had 70 or 80 people see Titanic on the last night we showed it, 6 months into the run. Almost a half a year. But E.T., Grease, Titanic, and Grease was at the old place where we had just one movie. And somebody that would see that movie on the first weekend, and they might see it twice, but then after that, there was nothing for them. You know, come on, we need a new movie. You need a new movie. If you see it opening weekend, you want a different movie the next weekend. But and it became contractual that you had to show it at least 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then if it was held over longer than that, it was just our own choice because it kept doing business.
Do you think the tourism business helped you?
Oh, without a doubt. Even back in the 70s, if it wasn't for July and August, it was probably pretty much that way, not just with the theater today, but with most businesses. Mm-hmm. They'll tell you that if it wasn't for July and August, February, March, and January, February, March gets real lean. Mm-hmm. I used to stand out in front or stand inside looking not to see if anybody was coming to the movie in January, but to see if anybody was even going to drive down the street in January. Snowing and blowing and stuff, but that improved a little bit with the 3 screens and the variety, but it was still tough in the off season.
Well, you did blockbusters, but you also did art films, didn't you?
We did have a nice art series. A lady named Mary Adams, who was, I'm sure most people know, very involved in the community, brought it up. They love movies, she and her husband Chuck. I got to know them well, and we said, well, we'll try it. And there's, we called it the Second Sunday Film Series, and every month on the second Sunday, we started out slow, but then we picked out movies that were art-type releases that would place, and I think what got the ball rolling was I tracked what movies were playing at a place called the Main Art Theater in Royal Oak and the Maple Theater in Birmingham. They were what they called art houses. Mm-hmm. And they played movies that normally wouldn't come to small towns. In fact, not normally, didn't. No one else up here had done that. And we didn't make a lot of money, but we attracted people that normally wouldn't go to theaters, period. We set it up as kind of a partial charity event to begin with. A portion of the ticket price was donated to things like the library, the hospital, the fire department had a fundraising thing, and we gave them a few $100s. But we ran it 3 days on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And quite often the pictures, they weren't what you'd call current, some of them after the Academy Awards. Anybody that follows movies knows that the Academy Awards go quite often to people say, what the hell, I've never heard of that before. But these art-type pictures with, and we got it going, it got the ball rolling nicely. And if you had the right picture in, and it was a word-of-mouth thing, a lot of women came dragging their husbands, Mary used to say. She said, the women will drag their husbands to these things, so it'll be a success.
Or leave them home.
Yeah, but mostly they came, and it turned out to be, I was not only, but the movies were good. I mean, they didn't appeal to the masses, but I wish I could remember some of the names. Some of them we filled the place up more than once, and even held them over sometimes for an extra day or maybe an extra weekend. And so it was just a nice touch, which Mary saw that and suggested it, and it worked.
And you also paired with the Village Pub some, didn't you?
We had we started up a dinner and a movie night. I think they might have that going yet, where You could have dinner at the pub and come to the movie on Monday nights. That worked real well too. We did that in the off season. Terry was too busy, the pub was too busy to do it in July and August. So we used to end that sometime in mid-June and start it up again after Labor Day. Another nice touch for a local small town place.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about how technology evolved in the movies?
Well, we went shortly after the carbon arc days when we first went in there in 1972. There had been Xenon, Xenon, Xenon or Exxon bulbs, however you want to pronounce it, took the place of what they called carbon arcs. And an arc was actually lit. You had to light it by hand in the old projectors, and that's what illuminated the 35 millimeter film and shot the image to the screen. But they were quite dangerous and things. We talked a little bit about that. But we switched over to the Xenon bulb, and it was a 1600 watt bulb. It was so bright you couldn't look at it. You had to wear glasses but most of the time it was housed inside the projector. So in little rays of light, even with the carbon arc, would come out the cracks and stuff like that. But the housing protected your eyes from it, but there was no need for the projectionist to look at that anyway. But with the electric bulb, you could just strike that and it'd come on, and there wasn't a need for somebody to sit there and constantly move that carbon arc forward to keep the illumination proper. But we switched over to that after, I want to say within 2 years, it became pretty common. Most theaters were switching over. I remember it being quite expensive. The bulbs were like $450, and they were guaranteed maybe for 1,000 hours, which would be, depending on, in the summertime, you'd go through one in a month, because we ran extra shows. But it was all part of doing business. And somebody said $450 for a light bulb, but it was more than that. It was just intensely, it was bright and everything, and plus it improved the quality of the picture on the screen.
What about the film?
Film was 35 millimeter, used to come in big steel canisters.
Heavy?
Depending on the length of the film, they used to come in cans with 3 reels in each can. And once in a while, like Titanic, was almost 3.5 hours long, so that came like in 4 different cans. Most movies are 90 minutes to 120 minutes long, 1.5 hours to 2 hours. But yeah, they were heavy. They came by PEP lines. They used to come, talk about the post office and it's rain and snow and sleet. PEP lines got your movies to you every Thursday. They would deliver the ones that opened on Friday, and then they'd come back on Friday and pick up the one that ended the night before. But PEP lines, I remember, prompt, efficient, and professional. They always made it. And in the latter years, UPS took over the delivery of the prints. But
what was that film made out of?
oh, it was you couldn't light it on fire. It was 35 millimeter acetate type material, and it was treated. And that had that didn't update like the bulbs did, but that was mostly, and whoever developed the 35 millimeter film that would not burn had to be some type of a genius, because there used to be a lot of threatening situations where a projection booth could catch fire.
Well, the Palace Theater actually burned down, didn't it?
It did when we were only kids. And I have no idea what started that fire, but the projection booth was like a pillbox. It was all around the inside was lined with steel plates. Mm-hmm. So if a fire had started in the projection booth, it wouldn't have gotten out of there. So I'm not sure. And I think the main part of that fire was in the auditorium, and not a whole lot burned because it was just the seats, but and then the big high ceiling. But I, for some reason or other, do not have all the details of. I'll have to go to the Historical Society and find out just what happened in that fire. But I think you and I were only 2 or 3 years old back then.
It was 1945.
45,
and I think
yep.
the Sugar Bowl had some damage on one side, And then Earl Young's office area had
Little
some
building.
roof damage on the other side.
Very possible.
Yep. They tried to get Mrs. Moon to sell that property to the city at that point so that they could open that whole area up for a
I
park.
wouldn't be surprised,
But she
because
didn't
people
do
that
it.
have been around or were around in those days knew that East Park used to be filled up with buildings, and one by one they started burning down, and then they bought some and tore it down, and East Park is East Park.
You said that PEP used to come and deliver your films and then pick them up. Did they just rotate them through northern Michigan?
Quite often, even in those days in the summertime, film companies would have what they call a wide release, and that was when they would send out 2,000 or 3,000 prints of movies. In the off season, there would be only maybe 1,000. So a bigger theater, Petoskey always got movies ahead of Charlevoix, except in the summer and around Christmas time. Then we could both get them at the same time if we wanted. At some point after I established the relationship with the film booker and we started building our business up, that's what they look at too, as to where they're going to place a movie. And we became quite competitive with Petoskey as far as being able to get movies. Because there was a time when, oh, we're going to Petoskey first and you can have it after then. But there was what they called cross-shipping in the 70s and 80s, and even in the latter years, there was times that I would go to Petoskey and pick a film up and bring it over and start showing it in Charlevoix the next day. Same end on Thursday over there, pick it up, start here on Friday. But then as the film industry got bigger and more popular, the prices started to go down, more theaters opened up, the single screens turned into, there's theaters in the city with 30, 40 screens in the same location. So they started making more movies, and as a result, the price apparently went down. And all of a sudden, a big movie today will open in 5,000 screens across America. 5,000 compared to a few hundred in the old days. So almost anybody, if you paid your bills and if you had the potential to do business, you could get a movie. Yeah.
Did you ever get any, important stars that would come to Charlevoix?
Michael Moore was here more than once. A week or so after he won the Academy Award for Bowling for Columbine, Michael I got to know him well because he had a place on North Torch Lake. and that was a little bit of a controversial film, as is Michael, as I am from time to time. But I enjoyed meeting and knowing him. But the movie won the Best Documentary Film, which kind of put him on the map. And because of our relationship and his nearness, he said, let's do this. And he brought the film up, literally brought that up by himself. And he brought the Academy Award up, and we showed it for a week. And we had a fundraising thing for Bases Teen Center, I remember it well. And we filled the place up one Sunday with 2 or 3 shows with 250, 300 people at each movie. And he made a little presentation and showed the Oscar itself off and talked about it. A lot of questions. There was some other famous people in there. Dick Enberg was in there with Dean Davenport one time. I had pictures of him on the wall. And some of these, I guess here in modern time, Tim Allen, I guess, used to come around. In fact, I know he did in the summertime, and low key, but he'd been in there. Kid Rock has been around, I guess, now. And these people come and go, and sorry to say, Kid Rock, I wouldn't know you if I saw you, but my nieces and nephews would. But yeah, you know how it is in Charlevoix in the summer. There's a lot of people that come around here, especially with Bay Harbor and things like that close by.
You mentioned earlier the posters used for advertising, those large posters.
One sheets, they're called.
Mm-hmm. They became wonderful works of art all in themselves, didn't they?
Some of them, I still have the original Star Wars, first 1, 2, and 3 posters, and they say they're worth $5,000 or $6,000 each. Could be each now. I haven't even looked on, But that's if they're like an antique car or anything else. You got to find somebody that will pay that. Because there's time in my life when I would have sold them to, because I could use the money. But now they're duplicated so easy, you know, with not only as film technology and theater technology, but you get a popular movie poster and somebody can duplicate the thing so fast, and the next thing you know, it's for sale in a store or on a street corner. And
How did you get those initially? Did you
they
buy
came,
them, or did they come
we
free?
had, yep, we had to buy them from the distribution companies, the film companies. That was another department that they had, and those became available as the merchandising in movies improved. We could get them months in advance. Like I say, if you were to go to the theater today, there's one sheets in there in nice frames promoting movies that are coming at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And if not already by Christmas time, they'll have one sheets advertising the movies that are coming out on the 4th of July of 2017. The merchandising and the programming they're just a professional operation. And that's filtered down to the local level, to small places. But in the city, when things where somebody said, well, you know, down in Detroit, they've got a theater with rocker chairs. Well, that was all because of their business potential in the business they were doing. It took time for things like that to get up here. Things like that are available here now.
We've talked about the film and the projectors, but we haven't really talked about the acoustics of the buildings.
Oh, sound became a huge part. In the old days, at the old palace, there was 2 big horn speakers, and usually they were behind the screen. And in musicals, they were, you can remember, they were pretty spectacular. South Pacific or any of the big musicals, and the quality of the sound was good. But at some point in the 70s, when surround sound came in, when stereo became at home, when stereophonic sound came into the house, and they expanded that, and you had 4 or 5 speakers on each side of the wall. That was on, you know, people would come in, well, what are those? Well, those are our new speakers. And there'd be 8 or 10 speakers inside a huge auditorium. And then when the theaters got stereophonic sound, that's an old term, isn't it? You don't hear stereo anymore.
Like Technicolor.
Yeah, presented in Technicolor, that was a big step too. Yeah. But the sound became almost, and they started giving Academy Awards for the technology of sound. And you'd go to a war movie and you'd hear bullets zipping over, coming from behind you, and planes flying over, and that just became a tremendous art as well. So sound technology and presentation, and then of course there was 3D. And
Did Charlevoix ever get into any 3D, anything like that?
they have a 3D screen at the theater now
Okay.
that the Kurtzes put in after they took the theater over.
But you didn't have one?
No. It was just coming on, and it was quite expensive. But now, and it's not old hat, but it was kind of a novelty when it first came in. There still are some 3D, and high definition is big, and IMAX is huge. There's an IMAX screen in Traverse City, and it's the only one up north that I know of, but they charge a lot more, like almost $20 or $25. I know my nephew-in-law and my niece went down with their kids a year ago and saw a new Disney movie at the IMAX, I think at a Henry Ford Museum. And it cost almost $200 for 5 of them for tickets, popcorn and pop, the whole 9 yards, which he was there, so he says, I paid, but he was glad he did it. He said it was an incredible experience. I've never seen an IMAX film, but one of these days.
They are awesome.
I've heard.
They really are. What about the concession stand?
Very important part of the business.
Remember the little nook in the wall when we were kids? That was owned by Gladys's?
Oh yes,
Did they own
next
the
door, the Taylors did not sell concessions for some reason or other inside. They had Mary and Gladys George Gladys next door with their little popcorn and pop machine.
And candy?
And candy, yeah. But that's a big part of any theater operation now. And it started, it probably already went on, but at some point it got to be a problem when I moved the theater to Antrim Street. Olson's was right across the street. Theaters charged more money for their candy, for the convenience of it. They had what they called theater size candy, Milk Duds and Juji Fruits and all that would come in a larger design to have you enough snacks to get you through the whole movie. But theaters need that revenue to exist. If I could get film rental to pay the mortgage and the taxes and the heat, my living came from popcorn and candy sales. And that can be a fairly big item if you're busy. But people started, you'll see signs in just about every theater now that you cannot bring outside food inside. People still sneak it in, I'm sure they did. Yeah. But without the candy and popcorn sales, couldn't exist. You could not exist. And it's tantamount to somebody bringing in their own food into a restaurant, things like that. Exactly. It's a little harder to explain because people, my problem wasn't with Olson's, it was just people go over there and they'd save $1 or something, come in with it in their purse or their jacket. So, but no fist fights ever broke out or anything like that.
That was good.
Very seldom would I have to kick anybody out, but most people kind of honored that, and if you explained to them what was going on.
So what do you see as the future of the movies?
I have no idea what can possibly come next because it's just so technologically advanced now with the IMAX and things. I could only imagine. You've apparently seen an IMAX picture. But the sound technology, the films now, the 35 millimeter film is gone. All comes on a compact disc. When that first came out, those things would freeze up like your home computer, boom, stop. And it would be a little disruption if you were watching the movie, and the biggest problem they had to overcome was you couldn't just unfreeze it and have it pick up where it stopped. It would go back to the beginning when you rebooted it, you know. And so all of a sudden you're in an hour into a movie and you gotta go back. But they've fixed that. And as far as I know, those things just glide along perfectly. And the film quality is just, it's like television at home. You know, you and I sit at home watching TV, and if we compare that, I can remember watching TV and saying, I think I can see something. Oh, that's snow on the screen. But the quality of television, and it's just magnified on the big screen. Still nothing like the big screen. No. The huge, huge screen.
Absolutely nothing like seeing something in a
and
movie
add the
theater.
sound and add the curved screens
Yeah.
and add the technology.
Well, thank you, Bill. It has been very interesting speaking with you today.
Thank you.